all I want to know is more and more and more history to put it all in. And I can't learn enough. I walk through time and all these characters and events keep jumping out at me. So if I go to 1200, for example, down there, we walked that lane today. I've got Great Zimbabwe happening in Africa. I've got the Song Dynasty finishing in China. I've got, I know what's happening at Chaco Canyon with the Pueblo people. So all these different things are happening at the same time. I can see what's ahead, Henry VIII and all that. I know that I'm up to King John in England. So I'm now seeing things happening at the same time. Mm-hmm. So Joan of Arc and Pachacuti, who built Machu Picchu, are born in the same year. So I know they're all around the same time. What did they know of each other, of their worlds? Mm-hmm. I can see what's ahead. I can see what's behind. I can stand at a point in history. All I want to know is more and more and more history to put it all in. And I can't learn enough.
Teil 3 des Rethinking Memory Café Interviews mit Dr. Lynne Kelly. In Teil 3 und Teil 4 dieses Gesprächs geht es um die praktische Anwendung jahrtausendealter Merktechniken im 21. Jahrhundert. Dr. Lynne Kelly hat eine erstaunliche Forschungsarbeit geschrieben. Sie hat herausgefunden, dass alte Monumente wie Stonehenge oder die Monumente der Osterinseln beispielsweise alte Gedächtnisorte waren, sogenannte Gedächtnispaläste. Gedächtnispaläste, mit deren Hilfe alte Kulturen, die keine Schrift besaßen, einen enormen Wissensschatz über mehrere Jahrtausende hinweg tradieren konnten. Dr. Lynne Kelly geht sogar so weit, dass sie sagt, dass diese Kulturen Wissensschatz über 17.000 Jahre tradieren konnten. Das heißt, fehlerfrei von Gedächtnis zu Gedächtnis und von Generation zu Generation weitergegeben haben. Diese Merktechniken sind absolut mächtig. Als Lynne Kelly mit ihrer Forschungsarbeit begann, ahnte sie nur schemenhaft, zu was für großen Merkleistungen sie eigentlich imstande war. Mit einem eher natürlichen, sehr schwachen Gedächtnis ausgestattet, merkt sie sich heute unzählige Lernprojekte, von denen sie auch in dieser Episode erzählen wird. Insgesamt 40 Merkprojekte hat sie gerade am Laufen, an denen sie persönlich arbeitet. Ganze Vogelklassifikationen lernt sie so im Nullkomma-Nix auswendig. Aber auch zum Beispiel die ganze Geschichte von der Urzeit bis in die Gegenwart. Und sie erzählt in dieser Episode, wie sie an Schulen verschiedenen Jugendlichen, verschiedenen Kindern diese mächtigen Mnemotechniken beibringt und welche erstaunlichen Erfahrungen sie dort mit den Kindern und Jugendlichen bereits gemacht hat.
Einfach lernen mit Rethinking Memory.
So Lynne, you're a science writer and you were very skeptical of mnemonics before you started to dive in, right?
Absolutely. Because I've got such a bad natural memory, I assumed that people that could use mnemonics already had a good memory and were just improving on it. It wasn't until I tried the techniques, and I've got 40 different experiments going on at the moment, that I realized I can memorize anything using these methods.
And what exactly, which projects do you have right now?
Well, I keep working on all of them, playing around depending on my mood. But in particular, what came out of the memory code, people asking me, how do we apply these methods, was they kept asking about foreign languages. Now, this is a bit upsetting because I was very, very bad at foreign languages at school. I tried French, German and Latin, failed them all. Took French right through to fifth form because we had to do sciences at uni in the olden days. And so I couldn't manage any. So I decided to test if these memory devices would work better, took on French, was astounded that I could not only learn it, but I could love it, really have fun by using the memory techniques. And we'll get into which specific ones as we get to the different devices. So I decided to be very ambitious and took on Chinese.
Oh, wow.
And
Chinese.
there's no way I would have got anywhere with Chinese without the memory techniques.
Oh, wow. I could imagine. Chinese is really quite something.
Well, you've got no hooks because all the words are unfamiliar. So at least with French, I've got some familiarity with the way it works. With Chinese, you start with nothing, absolutely nothing. But and the memory techniques have to be used differently. If we talk about when we get to memory palace, I'll use the languages as one of the examples as we get to the different ones. But the way I use memory palace in French is quite different from the way I use them in Chinese. And there are advantages in learning Chinese over French. Once you get over the initial hump, there's actually easier things. They don't have plurals. They don't have tenses. The verb to be is ghastly. And I don't know, the German was pretty awful too. And genders, no genders. But the verb to be in Chinese, in Mandarin, is shi. That's it. No more. No futures, past, anything.
Really?
No genders, no plurals. So there's a lot that became easier, and the words can only be made up of a specific number of syllables.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I can assign mnemonics to every possible combination.
I see.
I can't do that with English or French or anything else or German. I could say, ich habe einen Hund. And I can vaguely remember a little tiny bit of German, not a lot.
It was good.
I don't have the Hund anymore, but I don't know how to say I haven't got it.
Ich habe keinen Hund mehr.
So, yes, having the techniques, even though I'm learning two languages, they're very different.
Mm-hmm.
But I can apply the techniques because I've got that toolbox. And that's what they are, a toolbox that you can apply to anything.
That's cool. So your second book, I'll just hold it up here one more time, Memory Craft. It's a very and a highly practical book. Like you already said. What motivated you to write it?
And that's the Australian edition you're holding up. The American edition's got a different cover.
Okay.
But it's exactly the same book inside.
Mm-hmm.
What motivated me to write it was all the people saying, how do we apply this? And because I was having such fun, I tested some of the things. Let me give you an example. You knew I'd get to La Casa sooner or later. You've read my books and you know how obsessed I am with my La Casa. So this skepticism, I read of this African device. They look like that. Mm-hmm. This is not a real one. There's no real ones in Australia. But they look like that. And according to the research, they can memorize massive amounts of information just on a device like that. Now, I'm a skeptic and a scientist. I just didn't believe the research. So very unscientifically, I just grabbed a block of wood. That's what they were making our new veranda with at the time. Grabbed some beads and shells and glued them on. I didn't even put them on in order. Hadn't even decided what I was going to memorize with it. And which way up is it? No, that's the right way up. And I started memorizing the birds of the 412 birds of my state because my husband Damien is a fanatical birder. And I thought, let's get them on. So every bird family is there, and then stories, add them. I have got that whole 412 there.
Wow.
So you start at the top. Well, that bead fell off. I'm not very good at craft. That bead fell off. But the Australian chiringa, they use exactly the same way and other devices. And you touch each one. So your hands are different. It feels different. That bead fell off. The first one is Dromaeoidae, which is the emu. Mm-hmm. The emu, our big bird with like an ostrich, vicious creatures. It fell off, but it left a pointy, sharpy bit, so I didn't put it back on because that's just what emus are like. That was easy, and Dromaeoidae I remember because drum roll, off we go. The second one, I'm not doing the whole lot, by the way. The second one where am I showing it? There is anatidae. And can you see that little tiny mark? If you look very carefully, you'll see it's a ducktail wagging. Can you see that? You can never look at that now and not see a ducktail wagging. And there's 16 ducks. So I've got a story. It includes the Swans, which is a football team, and it's a story about a football game that got out of control and everybody starts bashing everybody up, and the shoveler, Australasian shoveler's a bird, buries all the dead, and the hardhead bashes everyone up. But that story gives me the 16 species in taxonomic order, so I know which are close to each other. And so I go on through the whole lot. So when you get to this one, you can see I spilt glue down the side. You'll always find something in the wood grain, something. That's Menuridae, which is our lyrebird, and that looks like a man has urinated down the side of my thing, and it's a lyrebird. So he's even lying about the fact that he urinated on my Leucasa. You will always come up with something because your brain will just do it.
That's
and the
so
more
cool.
you do it, the easier it becomes. 412 birds on there, and gradually layered. So I've got all the families, then I've got all the species, now the identification and habitats and bird calls I'm starting to put in. All sorts of things can just be layered on top. So that's now based on a real one because I went to America. There's none in Australia, but I went to the Brooklyn Museum in America and actually held them. And so that I had a craftsman, Tom Chippendale, made that for me because I'm not that good at craft, and he's done it the way, but set out for the history of writing. So designed for the memory that it's encoded, which is, of course, what the African, the Luba people of Central Africa, of the Congo did. They even use the back too. And if you start doing that, you'll find it all works. And doing it that way, choosing the beads and laying it out, it is so effective. And I've run lots of workshops where people choose the beads that they want to match what they try to put in, and they cannot believe we've got 3-year-olds making them with a lot less beads on them. And kids at schools, they just adore doing them, and so do adults. Unbelievable how well they work.
Wow, that's so fascinating for me.
But I was a total skeptic. I couldn't believe it until I did it. I get the same reaction. I get emails galore from people sending me photos of their Leucasa. Shocked how well they work.
That's
I don't
so
need
cool.
that with me when we go out birding. I don't take that with me. It's in my head.
You just remember it? Oh, wow.
I can't not once you've started using one.
And do you use one bead for one species of birds, or can you also?
No, there's not 412. Oh no, as in for one family. The families are on there, and then the stories. No, the Anatidae there's other green beads the same, but they're in different positions. They're next to different beads. These shells might look the same, but they're in different positions.
Oh, okay.
And that makes them different. Or the grain down here, it's the grain in that little bit happened to jump out at me. So the fact that there's lots of these little brown ones, but they're all next to different grain or in different positions. Your brain will find it. Your brain will do it. Just trust it.
You'll get me started on a craftsman adventure eventually. I guess I would have to build my own.
Well, it's just a bit of wood with beads, and the cheap way to get beads is to go to, I don't know if you call them opportunity shops like we do here, or charity shops or whatever, and just get old necklaces. Or
that's a great idea.
Family thing, and just cut up old necklaces. That's why all of them seem to have little holes in them. So
and then just super glue them on.
And just super glue them on. Exactly.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll do that actually. And do you find using a Leucasa more memorable than using a memory palace?
No, I wouldn't say that. If I'm going to put a lot of information in, like I do on the one for countries or for history, we're going to talk about walking through history, I'd use a memory palace because I've added the stories to that to give me every species. But a country has so much information. So I spread them out. For a lot of countries, they have an entire house as I walk down the street. I want to be able to attach a whole stack of information to it. So for that, I'd use a memory palace. It depends how much I want to add and my mood at the time. So I have different, look, I've tried just ordinary memory boards, just drawn on that. Which way up? About there, that's the spider families, because you learn spiders by their eye patterns. That defines each different family, except the Araenidae, the orb weavers, there's a whole lot, so that's down to species. But that works, but it doesn't work as well as that because it's not a tactile.
It's not a what?
Tactile, touching.
Oh, yeah.
You don't. There's a little bit with the grain, but not much, whereas this, everyone feels completely different. So that's more effective than that.
I see.
And that one becomes more effective again. That's the Prime Ministers of Australia, the right way. Because, again, you've got a tactile effect, a touching effect. So that works unbelievably well. If this house burns down, I'd probably rescue my husband, grab the photographs and grab that before anything that's worth money, because it is so precious to me. I'm so emotionally engaged, and an emotional engagement aids memory.
I see. That's fascinating for me for one reason as well, because like my students, I often encounter my students asking, what am I gonna do if I run out of memory palaces? I mean, that's a problem also for me. When I started with my Bible memory project, I'm not a huge traveler, so I'm basically restricted to Austria and some, Greece and wherever we had vacation. But that doesn't occur like, some people go on vacation like thrice a year or whatever. I barely go once. So if my wife drags me, I'm a stay-at-home person, And the thing is, when I did my Bible memory project, the Bible has 66 different books, 1,189 chapters. So that's like a huge thing. And there were points when I ran out of memory palaces, and I had to push myself to find more places, which I eventually did. You find that there are eventually more places than you thought of it at first. But I think the Lukasa approach is a very, it's not only unique, but it's a beautiful thing, because you can create memory palaces, a huge amount of memory palaces for every different topic with ease, right?
And you can use lots of them. I hate traveling. I'm the greatest homebody you're ever going to meet. I've got 10 kilometers of memory palaces around this little country town, because I create them, not ones I already know, but I walk different streets, photograph the houses, and then when you give a house a name, so 5 kilometers of that is Chinese radicals. So the characters in Chinese have little base. They're not just random squiggles. They have little base starting points, which the dictionaries are organised by what are called radicals. So I set up a memory palace for the radicals on streets that I don't know at all, photographed each house, and then as I name them, so for example, Zhen, which is the person radical, I looked at that house, and there on the chimney was bricks in the shape of the radical character. Every one I have managed to find something. Yue, which is month, sort of looks like that. And the gate of that house, there it is. And so then each of those houses are named. I don't remember their numbers in the street. I don't care. I've named them by the radicals. I don't need to know them all in order. I have learnt them in order. But if you want shui, water, my brain will go straight, as it did then, to that house, because the fence is shui to me.
Cool.
So I create them in my neighbourhood all the time. I don't need to go anywhere else, because with my memory, I can't remember houses I've lived in. I would struggle to navigate them, or schools or anything. So I have to create them where I can visit them a few times to get them in my head.
I see. It's an interesting approach. I think I can learn a lot from you with your creative approach to memory palaces and memory techniques. That's really, really nice. And I hope we can stay in contact over
Absolutely.
this interview.
This is fun.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit more about the content of your book, Memory Craft. You take us on a practical journey, so to say, through history almost, right? Tell us a little bit about the content of the whole book.
Right. The book goes through all the different techniques and uses whatever my experiment is as an example, but of course they can be applied to anything. We'll come back to the medieval one because I would like to go to the history one, seeing we're talking about memory palaces, because every memory palace we've talked about to date is one location for one object, move on to the next location. I mean, a Leucasa is just a memory palace in miniature, so we've got one location each. History doesn't work that way. It's continuous. So I have, it's probably about 2 kilometres. If I walk out the front gate, I start at 4,500 million years ago and then walk around that block and get back. Can you see the block? Walk around the block and get back to our house at 1000 BC. And then I walk down this bit of street to 0 and then round another big block. Now, you have to scale it. So setting it up first, before I put in any information, I had to scale it. I can't put every year in, or else I have to go around the earth about 6 or 8 times. So it goes down in tens of thousands or millions of years, then thousands of years. And then by the time I do the last little bit, I've got every single year from 1900 on. So I scaled the whole thing out and then started putting events in. So there aren't individual locations. When I wanted Jane Austen down there, she's just down there, I just went down to that location and looked for something that I could associate Jane Austen with, and I'll always find it. And then my memory will always go to that location for her, and I'll get her within, a few years, because by then I've divided it up into 25 years. So I walk through time, and all these characters and events keep jumping out at me. So if I go to 1200, for example, down there, we walked that lane today. I've got Great Zimbabwe happening in Africa. I've got the Song Dynasty finishing in China. I've got, I know what's happening at Chaco Canyon with the Pueblo people. So all these different things are happening at the same time. I can see what's ahead, Henry VIII and all that. I know that I'm up to King John in England. So I'm now seeing things happening at the same time. So Joan of Arc and Pachacuti, who built Machu Picchu, are born in the same year or within a year or two of each other. They're certainly the same. Sorry, Mehmed the Conqueror. He just landed on Joan of Arc. And then Pachacuti. So I know they're all around the same time. What did they know of each other, of their worlds? I can see what's ahead. I can see what's behind. I can stand at a point in history and just look around, and I don't have to memorize all the dates. I'm now using the Dominic system for numbers to put in all the dates that I want, but I don't have to put them all in because I've got, I can stand at that position and my brain will go to that location on the history walk, and it's not individual locations. They're added as I go.
That's fascinating.
And all I want to know is more and more and more history to put it all in. And I can't learn enough. That's what memory palaces do. Once you've got information, you want more because it's firmly, I'm back to this old ground the basis firmly and then layer the knowledge on top, which is the way Aboriginal songlines work, the way Native American pilgrimage trails, they all work that way. You put the basic information in, you teach that to the children, and then you add and add and add.
It's so fascinating. Could talk about this for hours with you.
Oh, I can go on for hours. This is my whole life now.
Oh, it's so nice. Tell us a little bit more about like an overview-ish. Can you give us a little overview of the content that's in your book?
It's basically all the memory devices that I found from indigenous, classical and medieval times, and Asian. Those are things I didn't look at in the memory code, the previous book, and how they work, and then applied them all and how you would apply them in a practical situations. So I open with the medieval stuff because it's the easiest to start with. Visual alphabets, it's basically a peg system. But, you know, one son, two, three, one son, two shoe, three tree, four door, which is a familiar one in English. You get to 11 and you've already done heaven for 7, so then you're in big trouble. The alphabet gives you 26, and by the time you've done 26, you can start again and they'll be far enough apart to give you a sequence. But what they did in medieval times with these is they linked things. So those using the zodiac, I combined two systems here. They would link. So the bull would be kicking the crab who would be biting the twins. I haven't got that order right, but still. So I did that with my visual alphabet. I had A, arachne, the spider character throwing her web over, B, the bird who's being attacked by C, the cat who's being burnt by D, the dragon. And then in my head, I can see those. I've drawn the artwork, which is all in Memory Craft. I can then see those things. I don't have to stop and go, A, okay, now I'm up to B. So when I'm giving a speech, in my head, your brain can do art separate to, or memory palaces separate to speaking, because don't have to go the logical link. You don't have to find your place in notes. So when I'm doing public speaking, I have the first thing, which is often the internet, why, the questions you've asked, why do we need memory device in the internet stage? So she's throwing a web, it becomes a net. That gives me the net. Then I go on to whatever the bird is. I adjust them for each talk. And so in my head, I'm following the pathway through the alphabet. If I get stuck, I can always go back to the letters and get the link. But mostly I need it. So that alphabet gives me a pathway. I use that for birding when we're out birding and I need to memorize the bird list. My husband calls out, there's a kookaburra, there's a crimson rosella, and then I'll just plonk them all in, and when we get home, whack down the bird list. So we're not stopping and writing all the time.
So you're memorizing your speeches as well when you speak live?
Yes. Oh, yes. You can't stand up and talk about memory and use notes.
That's true.
Not go down well at all. So right. I used to use Memory Palace, but I decided to use the visual alphabet. I can use either. I just use the visual alphabet because it works so well. And the beauty of anything artistic is you have to slow down. And this is why in teaching we get kids to do these things, because you can read a page of notes and be working out what you're doing for dinner. You can't draw something and encode information to it without concentrating on it. So by having them sketch, it doesn't matter if they're artistically good or not, having them sketch and work out, okay, which animal am I going to use for A? How is it interacting with the B? That time, and the prettier they make it, the more time they're focusing on that and getting that sequence. So it's just another memory palace. But the medieval people used bestiaries, and Mary Carruthers' work on this is fantastic. They're bestiaries, which are books of beasts, sets of animals. They were actually using them as memory devices. They didn't really believe all of them existed. Well, some might, some mightn't. So my big problem is remembering names. I cannot remember I can now. I couldn't remember people's names. So I created a bestiary, and the list is in and a few samples in Memory Craft, and now I've created the whole book, which should be sitting here, and it isn't. It's just out there. So then I use the first two letters. So AA is aardvark, and so on right through. So if I meet someone like you, Florian, FL, that's flamingo. So I immediately dress you in pink. So when I meet you, if a way that people use names is they say, meet someone and think of someone with the same name, or I can't do that. My brain doesn't work fast enough. It works quite slowly. But if I already have in advance what I've got to do, so I meet you, FL, boom, I've got the flamingo, I've got you in pink. If I want the rest of your name, I would. I'd probably add magician just to get the IAN, and I'd be able to, or flowers, or they make you with pink flowers or something. But I'd get that FL straight away. And so while I'm talking to you, I've got flamingos doing all sorts of things with you. If somebody that's a problem, the trouble is when you meet people, hello, I'm Flora, and now you start talking, I didn't take in your name. I've now got into the habit of saying, look, I'm really bad at remembering names, and I've got this system. I've got to associate you with a flamingo. Have you got anything to do with flamingo? So I have you talk about flamingos. Firstly, it's a compliment. I really want to remember your name. And secondly, you've got something strange to talk about rather than the weather. Don't say you are a flamingo, because when you get to Hillary, she's a hippopotamus. She doesn't like it. I associate you with that. I use that when I need to slow it down, and people love it. They think it's great fun to talk about flamingos. So that's how I've used a bestiary. And now I use the bestiary for languages and other things, but we'll get to that sometime, possibly, if I ever shut up.
No, it's awesome. I could keep you going on for hours. You quote from a variety of ancient sources in your books. What ancient writer did you find most helpful in applying in helping you with practicing mnemonics?
The Ad Herenium by Anonymous, he's probably the most useful writer, but I used the interpretation of his stuff from Francis Yates out of memory. But what really moved me was St. Augustine and what he wrote about memory palaces. And he said, and this is really what happens when you start to layer the palaces. So the one I've talked to you about history, about the countries, I also have all sorts of other things. I have all my numbers for Dominic's system. I have the periodic table in there. So, for example, if we look at location 5, I've got Brazil in there because it's my 5th country. I've got boron in there. So for Brazil, I've got everybody doing the carnival, and then in Rio, and then this little boring man in a white suit, in a grey suit and white shirt, steps out, which really contrasts, and he goes, nah. So he's boron, but he says, Rio's not the capital, by the way, Brasilia is, So they start interacting, and it doesn't matter. I've also got characters there. I've got all sorts of things at that location. So St. Augustine said, and I come to the fields and spacious palaces of my memory, where are the treasures of innumerable images brought into it from the things of all sorts perceived by the senses. And he uses all the senses. When I enter there, I require what I will to be brought forth. So if I'm doing periodic table, I want boron, I don't want Brazil. When I enter there, I require what I will to be brought forth, and something instantly comes. Others must be longer sought after, which are fetched, as it were, out of some inner receptacle. Others rush out in troops, and while one thing is desired and required, they say, start forth, as who should say, is it perchance I? These I drive away with the hand of my heart from the face of my remembrance, until what I wished for be unveiled, boron, and appear in sight out of its secret place. So he's talking about the way you've got all these things happening. So if I think about that window, I've got Brazil, I've got boron, I've got all sorts of other things happening. But what I want will come, and I push the others aside. Sometimes when I walk down the street, I just want to walk down the street. and tell all the people and all the events, just shut up. I'm sorry, I'm just going to get some bread. St. Augustine jumps out every single time from the lamppost halfway from here to the bread shop. He always jumps out. He ignores me. Probably of that quote. But that's what happens. The world becomes, your whole landscape becomes so alive, which is why Indigenous people can't stand being moved from their country, why the Native American tribes called it the Walk of Tears. They're walking away from their encyclopedia. I cannot leave this house. My entire landscape's alive. I'm not moving, ever.
That's so interesting. I'm just astonished. That quote from Augustine is really beautiful. Also, the way you read it, it's really touches my heart. And it's kind of like also my experience when you've worked with memory palaces and everything, it resonates with you very much.
Yes. And to think somebody like him was experiencing the same thing with their memory that we are. It's because the human brain has evolved. We have all got the Aboriginal people, the Native American, the ancient Greeks, we're all using exactly the same memory. And that's why when I read that quote and said, that's what it's like for me too, it was a bit astonishing because, what's happening in our brains is the same. And the neuroscience explains why place and music are so essential to memory.
Gleich geht's weiter im 4. Teil des Memory Café Interviews mit Dr. Lynne Kelly. Es erwarten dich noch mehr spannende Details über die Anwendung von uralten Merktechniken im 21. Jahrhundert.